Oh, it's auto recording. Okay, so I can cut a few initial seconds. That's fine. Okay, so
We have 7 attendees join actually.
hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Can you hear us? You are muted.
Hi, Dhruv. Hi.
Perfect. Do you want to try sharing your screen maybe if you want to test? I've stopped sharing, and just in case you want to try. Perfect. It shows up. So let me go back and share mine.
Dhruv, I think maybe let's start in another maybe 2-3 minutes because I can see the number of attendees.
Yes, I think we should start anyway. Let's. We have a tight agenda, so I'm sure people are joining. We'll start in 1 minute exactly from now. Hi, folks. So we are starting. Hi, everyone. Okay, just 1 second. I'll give Fred just 1 second. Okay, I can do that maybe a little later. I've got one message, but we can start. Okay, hi everyone. So welcome to RFCsWeLove. This is our IETF 108 outreach RFCsWeLove, which is something that we are trying with the Internet Society Rural Development SIG and ISOC together brings you this webinar, and hope you enjoy this one. For the next 1.5 hours, we will focus only on the IETF, introducing IETF activities with focus from India, as well as giving you tips for the upcoming IETF 108. This is our third fully online meetup. So since the lockdown, we have been trying to, where we used to meet physically in Bangalore and once in Kolkata. This is the first time that we are doing it in online. This is the third time that we are doing it online, and we have people from all over India. And looking at the attendees, we have people even from outside of India. So welcome everyone, and hope you find this useful. Regarding the Zoom webinar, please use Q&A to ask us any questions, and use the chat for generic chat discussions that you would like to have with other attendees. If you have questions for the panelists and questions for the speakers, use the Q&A. That's just a small little administrative. So this is our agenda. We will start with introduction to IETF. Michael Richardson will start that. He's already online. Next, we will focus on the IETF participation from India, and Vinayak will describe how our journey from India started and what all we have done in the last couple of years. I will be focusing on giving you some tips for upcoming IETF 108 and how to attend this online. And we will end today's session with a panel discussion on how to increase participation in India, in IETF from India. And Nalini Elkins would be moderating, and we have a bunch of different panelist members from vendors, from government, from academia. So we will have, I'm hoping for a very good discussion as part of this panel. So moving on with our first topic, Michael Richardson will be giving us a quick introduction to IETF. This will be a very quick 20 minutes introduction. So there would be, you might feel a little bit rushed, but don't worry, all this material will be provided offline. And via the information, you guys can go in and find more things in detail. So this is supposed to give you a quick introduction to how the IETF functions, how the IETF meetings are, working group structures, area structures, etc. Michael Richardson has he's a very well-known and respected IETFer. He is well known in the open source and open standard community, and he has been involved from coding to designing, and especially in the IoT and the security sides. He was a chair for role, and now he chairs a Stellar working group, and also is going to chair one of the BOF in the upcoming IETF 108. So off to Michael. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Dhruv. So I'm going to use Fred Baker's slides, and also some of the slides from the Edu group. And the IETF normally runs in person, runs a number of training sessions on the Sunday before IETF. And I believe they will run some of them again as well. So introduction to the Fred IETF. So I guess Fred did the slides about 3 years ago at an India ISOC, and I liked them, and I thought I would use them again. So what about the internet? You've probably heard of it. I really love this galactic network concept, and I don't know. I wonder how many people at this point. I don't know what the picture on the left is, some kind of machine room, but the picture on the right is a good choice. I really like it. It's a scene from Star Trek 4 in which Scotty picks up the mouse and tries to talk to it as if it's a microphone, as if the computer will speak to it. And I think that a lot of us have wanted that for a long time, and it's kind of interesting that we're kind of actually there. And in 1984, when that movie came out, I don't think anyone really had any idea where we're going that way. But in 1969, before I was born, the RFC series was created, and I think that's pretty interesting to me that it essentially is older than me. And they were started off as requests for comments, and vendors, as they said, thought these were requirements for compliance. And that's kind of interesting in many ways, because I think one of the reasons the IETF has been so successful is that we have never demanded compliance. And it's always been a voluntary process, and it's always been extremely inclusive. And if you look at some of the early RFCs, they are very different in how they think, how conversationally they are, and it's a big difference between that and RFC 8127 or something. Some people pine for the original days of that, and I think it's important to remember that the internet was always intended to be a network of networks. And I think that people forget this, even at the IETF regularly forget this. And they think, well, what does this mean for the internet as a whole? And it may be very important for the internet as a whole. And there are a lot of issues about wide things. But IP protocols are used in many, many places. And most homes, if you think about this, have a home router that connects their home network to the internet. And the things that are appropriate on one side of that home router may be inappropriate on the other side of that router. And it's interesting to realize that the pendulum always swings back and forth between cloud and edge and all sorts of other things like this. But that we really are now re-emerging into the space, I think, of having the internet being a connection of interconnected networks, be the IoT networks, sensor networks, cloud networks, all sorts of other things like this. And so it's kind of an interesting process, but to realize that going back, that was the original vision, was that each of the networks would be separately run, separately operated, and that they would be interconnected in some interesting way. The fact is that all those other protocols that weren't IP have died. They were exist in the 1970s and 1980s and into the 1990s, but they've effectively died at this point. So there's always this great story about Al Gore, the vice president, created the internet. And I didn't realize that, of course, he didn't do it as vice president. He did it as a junior senator. And there was a connection that came together to connect all these different networks together, all these supercomputer centers. And it was I went to university in 1989. And when I got there, we had just gotten a 56 kilobits per second connection to specifically we got it to CERN, and that's because I was in the physics department. And the problem we had, actually, it was interesting, is that we were running out of DECnet subnet numbers. And so in order to deal with the problem of running out of DECnet subnet numbers, there's only about 18 bits of them, we actually, the solution was to use the internet protocol. So we converted our 56 kilobits per second connection to CERN into a 2 times 56 kilobit connection for the whole university. Now, I was a student, I wasn't involved in that, but I was listening and paying attention, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. We're finally having the internet here. And it
Michael, we lost you for a minute. Are you there?
we lost it. The whole browser tab died. Is it back now?
It's back now. Go ahead.
So I was just saying that my first connection to the internet was in 1989 when the physics department that I was a student in decided that in order to connect better to CERN, that it was better to just connect an internet connection to CERN and do IP over that. And that's when it all started for me. So I was involved at the time. I had an Amiga, and I was involved in a network called FidoNet. So that was one of the networks that was connected together. And I actually ran a gateway between Usenet, UUCP, and FidoNet. And I ran this on my Amiga, and I actually wrote email. Of course, email was the killer app at the time, and Usenet was also very important. And I wrote a piece of code that spoke UUCP on one side and FidoNet on the other side, and actually didn't speak IP at all, but spoke RFC 822 internally. And I was like, well, when can I get this hooked up to the internet? Because I want to do that. So I actually had running code, and I read some of the specs, and things progressed, and eventually I was part of a group. Then we bought an internet connection for part of this. And so for me, I was always very surprised in the last 10 or 15 years when people had as well this myth about this conflict, and I'm like, no, that's impossible. It's always been the case, to my experience, that that open source was supporting open standards, and there was often pieces of open source code that implemented things that weren't open standards, and no one knew how they work or how to fix them, because you could never find out what the correct operation was. And so it was a case that, in my opinion, that the two have essentially both been built up together. And so you can learn a lot about open standards by reading open source, and you can learn a lot about open source by reading open standards. And one of the most interesting ways to get involved, in my opinion, is to pick up an open source project and try and figure out if it's misimplementing some open standard. That is a really useful thing to do, and it is not at all, in the 1990s and 2000s, it wasn't at all surprising to be asked to do that as your day job. Fix some open source piece of code and make it work because the company has a desire to do something. So I'm going to switch presentations here. The rest of Fred's slides are very good, but I wanted to get both parts in here. So now I need to say new share. Yeah, and no, that's the one. There we go. Okay, so this is the EDU slides. So the IETF came about, and the IETF has had a mission. It was we argued about this mission, and if anyone has been through a missioning process, you realize that every word in the mission has some meaning to the people involved in it, and sometimes less meaning for those outside. But the hope is that that the mission concisely and in an elevator pitch tells you what they do, and it's to make the internet work better. And then it says how we do it. We produce high quality, relevant, top technical documents that influence the way people design, use, and manage the internet. It's not just design, it's also use, and it's also manage. You'll also find that almost every working group has a mandate to do some kind of process and management. So we are now formally a standards development organization, an SDO. There was a point when there were a number of standards organizations and international treaty organizations that felt the IETF was not a standards organization and just something that would go away eventually. And we just sort of said, okay, well, whatever you think is fine, but we're going to keep doing what we do. And gradually it became clear that we were right and they were wrong. One of the things about this is that we have no formal membership. So anybody can come. You don't have to be a delegate from Cisco or British Telecom or whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyone can come. I was on the mailing lists when I was still a student, and I have worked for companies that have had no interest whatsoever in my IETF participation, and I just stay on the mailing lists and I just keep working, and often the companies figure out that actually it's a great value to do that. But in general, I have looked for opportunities where I could participate as an individual and bring value to my company. So one of the effects of not having a formal membership is we don't know who can vote, and so we don't vote. Instead, we use something called rough consensus. And there's a lot to be said about rough consensus, but essentially, it's not full consensus. We don't all have to agree, but we do have to listen to each other, and we do have to be aware of what's going on and what are the objections and why are people objecting. And often there's good technical reasons, and sometimes there's not so good technical reasons. And so it's important to listen to that. There's a lot of documents we have produced which have never gone anywhere. This is unfortunate, or maybe it's fortunate. Maybe they were bad ideas, but that's why it's driven by market-based adoption, because effectively what we're trying to say is that if the market needs it, it will adopt it. And if the market really didn't care, then maybe we wasted our time, or maybe it's too soon. So the IETF is organized into a number of areas. The list of areas, this is the list of areas right now. Applications in real time wasn't always an area of its own. It used to be applications, and we had a real-time area that was actually created around 2002, 2003 out of some other work that was in other areas. We used to have an area called sub-IP that dealt with MPLS and other things like this. Transport, I'm going to say in some ways it's withering, in some ways it's not. What's happening is that transport, which is normally thought of TCP and UDP and the congestion control protocols, a lot of that work migrated into applications in the form of UDP-based things, and then they basically redistributed some of that work back and forth between those two areas again. So there was a point when transport was like, well, it's just TCP and everyone knows how it works and that's it. Well, now it's grown back again to have a whole bunch of other things. Routing has been around forever, and there's some working groups. Some of the longest lived working groups are in the routing area, particularly BGP-based things. We have internet area, which originally 25 years ago gave us IPv6. There was other working groups. We had IPNG that was within that gave us IPv6. But basically, internet is the area that deals with the layer 3-ish things, if you want to think about that way. And then we have operations and management, and technically that's two groups. There's operations and there's management. And they are together in an interesting gestalt. And there are growing and shrinking things. And a lot of that work now is involving Yang. Historically, for instance, there was SNMP, but there's other things. The security area is well known. It's been around a long time. Gave us IPsec, gave us TLS, and a bunch of other protocols in that space. And there's a lot of security.
Hi, Michael, you there? Yes. Back?
Yeah, here we go.
Yes, go ahead.
So crashing. I have to notice that it died and restart. So I was just talking about security in general. General area is mostly meta things about the IETF. As I said, these are not we have 7 areas here. These have not always been the same 7 areas. There's been other areas been added. And as I said, ART is maybe 2 or 3 years old that we've called it that. It was transport, and we had real-time area, and there was some reorganization. And most of these areas have 2 area directors, but at times we've had 3 routing area directors, and we've had for a while 3 ART directors, and I believe we're back down to 2 again. So we have this motto: we reject kings, presidents, and voting. We believe in rough consensus and running code. And some people have said, well, actually, that's wrong. We believe in running code and rough consensus. And that's an interesting discussion. And there's a fair bit of experience that says that the best people to write the standards are the people writing the code, and that some code needs to be written at the same time as the standard is written. And I find that very compelling, and I find that personally very enjoyable to basically to sit down and write some code and go, oh, wait, I don't know what to do next. And then I come back to the document and go, the document doesn't say either. So what should it say? And then we have a conversation. Okay. And I think this is the most important thing about our voting and humming process, is that in general, what should happen in a working group is that we'll say, well, we think this is the right decision. And so we'll say, hum if you disagree. And the idea is that if you hear some disagreement, it doesn't really matter who is disagreeing exactly. The point is that you have some disagreement, and then you want to say, okay, wait a minute, let's continue the conversation and figure out what is the origin of this disagreement. Is this just because someone painted it pink and you would prefer green? Or is it fundamentally that you think that something just won't work? And Pete Resnick has a very good document that was written a couple of years ago, 7282, on humming. And I strongly urge you to read it. It provides a fairly good idea of what it is we aspire to. And I say it's aspire to because humming has gone a bit astray, in my opinion, sometimes in the IETF. and it's become kind of more like voting, and we try to get back away from that. So people are passionate, and these are some slides here about what would happen if you showed up at a physical meeting. People wear T-shirts, not suits, and they're very passionate, very vocal, and there's not a lot of respect for titles on people's badges, but rather what people say. If someone says something smart, something astute, then you're going to get a lot of respect, and it really doesn't matter where you come from. We have an alphabet soup of these different things. So as I said, we have 7 areas. Within those areas are a bunch of working groups. Within those working groups are working group chairs. We have these things called research groups, which are not quite the same and are more, as it says, researchy, and they have a different mandate and they have a different way. All of this is in theory overseen by the IAB and the IESG, and the IAB has created the IRTF as well. And finally, we now have this thing called the IETF LLC, and previously the IETF operated essentially as a operating area of the Internet Society, and now the Internet Society has essentially as a subsidiary called the LLC, the IETF Administrative Limited Liability Corporation. Those are the acronyms again. So there are, a lot of working groups, a lot of sessions. We are doing this virtually, essentially in the same format that we do it physically. We have some 8 parallel tracks that are happening. And some of those sessions will be what are called birds of a feather session. And these are essentially important, and my experience are the most important areas, because this is where new work happens. This is where we learn whether or not I care about whether or not data centers need to do a variation of TCP within the data center. And there was a BOF about that, and I'm like, yeah, that's interesting, but I don't care. It's not important for my work. So I go to the BOF, I listen, I go, okay, that's very interesting. That sounds like it's useful work to do. But it's not work I'm going to do. Or we're going to have a BOF that's this thing called ASDF that I'm going to be the co-chair of. And this is about a semantic description framework that has to do with tying together frameworks from dozens of other IoT consortiums and figuring out if we are in fact going to be the standards organization to standardize all the other ones. So different ideas, lots of other events. This is a typical kind of hotel thing. You can see that there's lots of laptops open, there's lots of people standing around chatting, and the question is, how can we best reproduce that online, and we'll see how successful it is. Finally, working group sessions. So these are going to be on Meet Echo, and I think there's going to be the next talk's going to talk about how to get involved in that and how to do this. But essentially, we are trying to reproduce this process. And if you look at these people, you see lots of their heads are down looking at their laptop. Some of them are reading email. Some of them are reading Jabber for the working group that's happening. Some of them are arguing with each other. Some of them are arguing with the people in the mic line. And of course, you can see the person on the screen who is remote. And so we're all going to be this person on the screen who's remote. And we'll see how that works. And that's really about it. I didn't really want to say anything more here.
Thanks, Michael. That was very informative. And folks, I will share all these slides. We also have Fred, who on the call earlier. I thought that the timing for him would not be the best. So maybe Fred, you have 2 minutes. Would you like to say something?
Well, the only thing I thought you did a very good job, Michael. The only thing was there was a question of what that computer was on the second slide. Well, that was the Sage computer from, I think, sort of 1956. It was a 1950s era computer.
Good to know. I couldn't tell.
No, I'll put the link to the description of that in the chat. I think the question for me is probably, do you have any questions? I'll contribute to the Q&A.
Yeah, so there was one question in the Q&A regarding what's going to happen to virtual humming after the COVID-19, and do you see this to continue, this tool that was recently launched? So,
Wow, that's a really
any
good
of you
question.
want to answer that?
I think that's a really good question, and I'm going to say that there's been a discussion and a debate about whether the virtual humming tool may in fact be a voting tool and really is undesirable. So I don't know what's going to happen to that. I think we need something, but I don't know if this is quite the right tool, and I think it will evolve a fair bit. I think it is very useful if we are able to include remote people in the hum.
I think we lost Michael again.
I think we lost Michael again.
Yeah.
So as he says, I think it's very important to include the remote people in whatever conversation there is and in the humming. I have basically worked remotely since 1994. And if there's one perspective I can give you as somebody who's remote, is what I see in a lot of meetings is that the telephone is at one end of the table and all the people are at the other end, and the remote people get lost in the shuffle. And that is something we specifically want to avoid in the IETF. We want to have one meeting and have that include both the remote and the local people. As to the specific voting tool, let me give you the history of humming. Where did that come from? We had one very influential contributor by the name of Jeff Case, and Jeff contributed the idea of humming. It was his humor at work, quite frankly. And I think, frankly, the discussion is kind of focused on how do we continue that thing. And well, I think the particular mechanism is relatively less important. What is important is the concept of it isn't 50% plus one. It's however we choose to count the people getting involved in a conversation, we're looking for a sense of the room, and room in a virtual sense. And any mechanism that we can use that will give us a sense of the room is a reasonable one. If we were on Zoom, what I would do is have everybody raise their hands. You know, if you agree with this, raise your hand. And now everybody put your hand down. If you disagree, raise your hand. We'll be using Meet Echo because that's what the IETF uses. But the point is that we're trying to get a sense of the room as opposed to 50% plus one or something like that.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, sure. Vinayak, I'll let you talk.
Thanks. So moving on, I think the next talk, we will talk a little bit about the history of participation from India. And we have Vinayak Hegde, who is one of the early contributors in IETF. He's currently the CTO in residence at Microsoft, and he has been involved in multiple startups like Zoomcar before, and he has a lot of good both implementation and standard experience. So off to you, Vinayak. I'll stop the share.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Should be able to see my screen.
It's coming.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Cool. Just give me a second. Okay. Cool. So yeah, so a bit about myself. So as Dhruv said, I'm the CTO in resident for Microsoft for Startups, where I work with startups and especially Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia region, and help them get onto Azure and help them with any kind of scaling issues. But prior to that, I have been involved in the IETF, and I was also I implemented a lot of protocols internally at Akamai because we were doing a network measurement product, and that's where the participation with IETF started. So a little bit about ISOC. So ISOC is an internet engineering society. It's a pan-India group of like-minded computer networking professionals. The mission of the IESOC is to further the adoption of internet standards and increase the participation from India in the IETF. Basically to create a peer group of people that we can reach out to, whether it is like simple things like how do I write a draft, or what mailing list should I post this to, or if to know about very specific processes. So we wanted to create like a mentoring group, and that was like the genesis of this. So IISOC conducts various capacity building programs in technical areas and mentors IETF participants. So you can find more information at the website, https://www.iesoc.in. So let me talk. Let me talk about my personal journey. So this is a picture from the first IETF I attended in 2009. I was working with Akamai at that point of time, and before I went to the IETF, I actually attended what is known as SANOG, or South Asian Network Operators Group, and that's where I heard there's a fellowship, and I applied to it and I got through. And you can see Fred is there on the table there, and also one of my mentors whom eventually I wrote RFC with, which is Al Morton. So this was the start, and the IETF 75, and then subsequently I attended many other IETFs, and wrote a couple of drafts. Some of them made it into RFCs, and some of them kind of could not get adoption. And also, if you see the other picture in Stockholm, it has a bunch of people from around the world. You also at the back you can see Windsurf, who's one of the who is known as one of the fathers of the internet. So it was very inspirational for me, especially I remember, I don't know if Fred remembers this, but one of the first conversations I had, I was facing some very weird problems inside China about network resets, and I was talking to multiple people, because I was not able to debug it, and I didn't know whom to ask, and I remember talking to Fred and other people, and they gave me a very deep insight into how the network in China is and how it connects to the world. And I was like, wow, I mean, I have asked so many people and I could not get good answers. How did you know about it, and how do I get such information? And to that, Fred smiled and said in his own way, and said, you should come to the IETF. And that was the genesis for me. And then Fred has been a constant mentor to many of us. He has spoken at connections as well, but this was like the beginning for me in IETF 75. Subsequent to that, I was one of the few participants from India at that point in time. So I got in touch with ISOC Kolkata, and we had the first what do you call seminar or talk on at ISOC Kolkata on how can you engage in the IETF, how can you write a draft. So I traveled to Kolkata, and we had like a good 2.5 hours talk, and that's where I met Anupam and Anand, who you can see in the left hand side picture at that time. Later on, we also had a meetup of all of the IETF technical community, right? So actually the date is wrong, so that's a typo. It was held on 5th of October 2015, and you can see Shraddha is also in there, one of the pictures. Shyam Madanapalli is also there in one of the pictures, and these people, both of them have been very active in the IETF as well. So we had this meetup, and that is where I first met Dhruv and a lot of other people for the first time. So the way I figured out how their email addresses was, the thing is that when you write any kind of RFC, you have to give an email address, right? So basically I figured out how to kind of get all of the email addresses of all of the authors who are from India, by parsing the parsing the RFCs, and that's how we had the first meetup in India, right? So it was quite funny, and there was quite a good turnout, and that is in 2015 we also was the beginning where some of us came together, me, Bharat, Anupam, Dhruv, Nalini, and then we started IIE SOC. So this was the beginning in India, and we have had multiple events in India. We have had the Connection, which is a flagship annual conference. We have had 3 editions, and 2020 we will have the 4th edition. Most likely, it will be online, and it looks increasingly it will be online. And we have had a couple of RFCsWeLove online as well. So we've done 3 or 4 continual events. I would say one was Connection, which was an annual event where all of us got together from all over India, and also we had participants from abroad. Michael spoke at it, Fred has spoken at it, multiple other people from abroad also have come and spoken at Connections. RFCsWeLove the concept is basically many of us are either implementers or academicians, and also some the policy makers. We wanted to get like a 360-degree views of network operators, network implementers, and talk about the problems that we face, right? Because you might feel that you've done a great job in terms of policy and code, and the RFC is perfect, but like operating it actually is a completely different ball game. And what we also so while we were doing the RFCsWeLove in India, and the Connections used to happen once a year, we also at every IETF we had the participation increasing. To get the contributors together, we had the IETF contributors dinner as well, as you see on the right hand side of the screen. So these are some of the pictures that from Connections 2017. Infosys was the venue, and the venue was really good, and we had a 2-day conference on a variety of topics, on routing, on security, on applications, on IoT. And we had a raft of speakers from India and abroad, and it was quite good that it was quite well attended. And subsequently we repeated it in 2018 and 2019, and then 2020, as I said earlier, we will do it online as well, right? So the good thing about online is that lots more people can attend it from India and abroad, and especially if we time it right, then we have participation from other places as well. So here are some pictures from RFCsWeLove. As I said, like RFCsWeLove is a way of getting people to talk about RFCs, whether they have implemented it or they find certain RFCs interesting. It could be it could be something like ACME, which is used for automatic deployment of certificates, or something related to network monitoring. And there are these various RFCs, and there are nuances of this, right? So when this RFC is actually implemented in the field, what are the kind of issues that you face? When you operate it as a network operator, what are the things that you need to kind of look out for? If you are an academician, right, and you want to incorporate some of the study that you've done from the field into the RFCs, how do you do that? So RFCs will have to talk about the entire process of RFCs, and it's like a place that we get together. So we've had it in like Christ College in Bangalore, we've had it in Zoomcar in Bangalore, we've had it in Bloom Villa in Indiranagar in Bangalore, we have had it in Kolkata as well, which was a day-long event. So we have been having this fairly regularly, and this is another edition where we thought, let's talk about the participation, because we've been talking mainly about the technical topics, but let's also talk about, how far we have come, because we have come quite a bit far. These are some of the pictures, as you can see, from the IETF India community leader. So typically every Wednesday, or so IETF week runs from Monday. Nowadays, actually, because of the hackathon and other events, it starts from Saturday to the first half of Friday. But traditionally, the working group meetings happen from Monday to the first half of Friday. And typically on Thursday night or Wednesday night is when we would have this dinner, and you can see some of the pictures from the IETF in Singapore, from Prague, and from other places around the world where we had these meetings. And it was a great way to connect with like-minded people, not just Indians, but people from abroad as well, get their input, as well as form these kind of connections. again, like, not one unintended, but find the connections between different people, because it's not just about writing a draft, but also how do you progress it, how do you go to the different levels, form that peer network, right? That was the whole idea of starting IESOC. So the Indian Community Dinner was also one of the events that we have conducted fairly regularly, and happens probably every IETF. This IETF, I don't know, it's very different, so how we'll kind of emulate that atmosphere. But there have been some ideas of we might do a drinks hour, or bring your own drink kind of hour, but let's see, we'll figure it out. So these are some of the activities that we have been doing. Now let's move on to the technical part, right? So we have so this is a screenshot from arco.net, and you can see that authors from India have actually participated in multiple different working groups, whether it's 6LOW, whether it is IPPM, whether it's TLS, TCPM, Quick, and they are actually spanning the entire spectrum pretty much. Whether it's application layer, whether it's transport layer, whether it's routing. So they're contributors, their security, operations and management. So we've had group Indians contributing to every of the 7 areas that are there in the IETF. And you can see also on the screen, several people who are on the panel are still very active. Like there's Dhruv, you heard, Tirumaleswar is on the panel. Manav Bhatia was very active and is still very active when it comes to directorate. Shraddha and Shraddha Hegde also is very active in the routing area. Shwetha Bhandari also is very active in the routing area. You have Rahul, I saw him on the call here, who is also contributing a lot to the RFCs in the IoT area. Similarly, Bharat, who's like the treasurer, is on the area, and also we have Sham Madanapalli, who's also contributed heavily in the IoT area, who's still active in IETF. So overall, what has changed is, for example, we have written many RFCs. I personally have written RFCs 8468, which talks about IPv4, IPv6, and coexistence, and we have updated the framework for IP performance measurement for the IPv6 world. Similarly, you have Dhruv, who has contributed to PC, and your Tirumaleswar, who has contributed to the security area, and then Shwetha and Shraddha have both contributed to the routing area. So overall, we have had about 171 RFCs. That's a fairly large number. And just before the call, me and Dhruv were discussing, we had about we were talking, and we basically looked at I think India is ranked number 6 or number 7 in the list of countries, considering EU as one region, in terms of the RFCs that people have contributed. And there's still people who are actually participating in the reviews as well when it comes to directorate. Shwetha, Manav, Thiru, and also you have Dhruv, who are part of directorates. I was also part of the performance directorate for a long period of time. So there are various ways of contributing. You can write a draft, you can do a review, you can contribute on the mailing list. You can also implement some of the standards. And for example, there is this group called LWIP, LWIG, which talks about lightweight implementation guidelines. That's what LWIG stands for, where any kind of standard that is related to IoT that you have implemented, you can talk about how was your implementation experience, right? So the IETF is very interesting because it gets various stakeholders. It gets people from a policy background, it gets people from a network operator background who operate networks, it gets people who are implementers and who are equipment manufacturers, and also gets academicians who are there. So you'll also see Mohit, who's also an academician in academia, who will be on one of the panels. So that's pretty much what I had, and this is the way you can keep in touch with the community. You have a mailing list, IETF Community India. I just posted the link to that in the chat as well for you to join. You can go to the website iesoc.in or connections.iesoc.in. We have a WhatsApp group. I've also again posted a link to the WhatsApp group if you want to join the WhatsApp group. both the mailing list and WhatsApp group is where we announce, the RFCsWeLove or any kind of initiative we have. You're also very free to ask any questions that you have about writing an RFC, about contributing to a working group, or in discussing any kind of technical or any kind of process input that you feel can be useful in the IETF. Yeah, I think I don't know if you have time for questions, Dhruv, but that's pretty much what I had. Maybe we can take the questions on chat.
Yeah, I think I suggest let's answer them on chat, and let's move on to the next one. Thanks, Vinayak. Okay, so next is me, and I'm sharing the desktop. Yes, you can see it. So hi everyone. The next topic will be tips for attending IETF 108. I might be giving you a lot more information that might be like, we are anyway running a little ahead of, little behind. So I have to be a little bit fast, but these slides I will share. So it has all the links that you can further click and find more information. So don't be overwhelmed if the information might be a little too much, but, and I think it's better to be, I prepared the presentation better for offline viewing. So it has all the links, etc., that you guys can refer at later stage. But let me just give you all the pointers that I can. Okay, so I think I'm a PC working group co-chair. I'm also on routing directorate. I'm also Sergeant at Arms of the IETF mailing list. My first IETF was IETF 78 in 2010, and now it's completing my 10 years of IETF. Hopefully, I can continue to participate. So what's the outline for the talk? I will first talk about the tools that you need to be aware of. Then what are the different types of session that happened during the IETF meeting, some of which Michael talked about: working group session, research group session, BOF session, etc. So I'll just give you what else happens during the IETF week and some helpful hints for participation. So the tools, the first main thing that you need to be aware of, that you need to register. This is little different than maybe if you participated some earlier years ago, where remote participation was just one click of a button and you used to get an audio. But now with MeetEcho, which is the tool that we currently use, you do need to register. And this time there is a fees involved for remote participation. In case you are one of those folks where this fee will be a barrier to participation, the IETF has generously given a fee waiver. So you are allowed to apply for that fee waiver if you are one of those people who would otherwise not attend the meeting looking at the price. But if your work can reimburse this, you need to support the IETF. IETF needs these meeting fees to run its operation. So only in case where you would otherwise not participate, please consider participation by applying this fee waiver. And when you register, you automatically join the IETF 108 attendees list. There's just one check mark that you need to click, and you can join this mailing list. So this will be a mailing list mainly related to the IETF meeting. So any question about attending the meeting and finding, you can always post to this list. All work in IETF happens on mailing list. So every working group, every research group, every BOF, and even a lot of non-working group and non-technical mailing lists like the IETF Community India mailing list, these all are hosted at IETF. So if you're new to the IETF, join mailing list. That will be the least minimum thing that you could do. The next tool that you need to be aware of is the data tracker. The data tracker is where we submit all our documents, all our internet drafts are there. In this IETF, one more important thing that you need to do is you need to have an account in data tracker, because MeetEcho login is linked with your data tracker account. So make sure that you have a data tracker account. It's very straightforward. Go to datatracker.itf.org. There is a create account on top under the user tab, and you will be able to create this thing. The IETF agenda is posted right here, where you will have the whole week agenda. Each working group session has this link. You can click on this agenda and reach the working group page, or you can directly go to the working group. whatever the group that you are interested in. For instance, if it is TLS, replace PC with TLS and you will be there. All the meeting material, agendas, minutes, slides will be posted on this link. There is an mobile application as well for both iOS and Android. This could be very useful for your calendar management and looking at your iPad or your mobile device. This is very useful. The link is there on the IETF 108 main page. Since there is a new tool, and this is the first time the whole in the whole IETF week in big way is happening, there is a participation guide that the IETF has prepared. Anyone who wants to participate in IETF, please go through this participation guide. This will give you good pointers like the Meet Echo, which is the introduction to the whole Meet Echo is there. This is just like Zoom or Google Meet, but this is an IETF like customized to IETF conferencing based on WebRTC. It doesn't need any application. It runs directly on your browser. It will work best on your desktop or laptop, not so much on your mobile device. So make sure that you have, you're using your laptop and headset and this related to, and make the setup is working. This will allow you to do video and audio conferencing, sharing meeting material, text chat, shared notepad, and the queue management, as well as something that we were discussing earlier, hums. So make sure this is the least that we need to make sure that if you are attending IETF 108 online, familiarize yourself with Meet Echo and solve all the issues that happens whenever you have a new tool upfront. IETF has already done a couple of like prep sessions, videos of which will be made available. And as far as I understand, there will be some more, even something during IETF week where an hour earlier, some people will be able to log in into a test session and practice joining into the queue, etc., and sharing audio, etc. So make sure you do this well. If not, otherwise it could be very disruptive during the IETF meeting. So familiarize yourself to Meet Echo.
Dhruv, there's another session an hour and a half from now or something to do that.
Perfect. Perfect. I thought we were like clashing with that. That's why I did not mention. So if please go and check on this link. And if there is a session that's happening, there is a session right now that you can join and practice on Meet Echo. The community takes notes earlier on Etherpad. Now we have a new tool called CodeMD, which allows you markdown usage. So it's pretty nice. It's much, so this will, like, you know, if you want to look at live notes, this is integrated with Meet Echo, or you can start on a separate browser tab as well. The link will be there in the agenda page. What other things that you need to be aware of? You heard of like, you know, one IETF term, like, you know, as a new joinee that always confuses everyone is Jabber. Don't worry, it's integrated with Meet Echo. So the chat in Meet Echo is like, you know, linked with Jabber. You can, if you already have a Jabber client, an independent XMMP client, you can also use that, especially if you need to, like, you know, align your screen space and not everything on one screen, and you have multiple screens, so you can use an independent Jabber client and connect to the working group. So now, since we are remote, this will be very important. There will be a lot of side conversation that happens. So I think I would suggest people to not just focus on the slides, but also look for Jabber conversation, and also ask your questions and doubts on Jabber rather than getting in a queue. Especially if it is like, you know, small technical help that you need. Only when you have technical questions related to the presentations that you can join the queue. Everything else, try to get it resolved using this chat/Jabber. One new thing that IETF is doing this time is Slack. This is ietf.slack.com. This is the participation invitation link, which I put it right there in the presentation. If you click on this, you will be able to join the Slack. The difference here would be the Jabber rooms are fixed. For each working group, here you can create a new channel based on your topic of interest, invite people and start discussing. So this will be a little different. Let's see how that goes. This is the first time, these two tools are the first time that the IETF is trying. IETF has a history of hallways, like between the IETF meetings, we used to have small breakouts. There we used to meet hallway, and the conversations that we used to have in this in these hallways were very important conversations. So, so we are trying to see how we can achieve that in an online environment. And one of the tools that IETF is using is gather.town to allow some more social interaction where you can participate in site conversations. The link for this is yet to be announced. There is a practice link that's on the webpage. So if you want to try this thing out, I will share this information later as well to our WhatsApp group, etc., and see if we can use this also for some of our social interaction. So let's see. This is forthcoming. More information is forthcoming. IETF calendar, since there are so many different working groups and everything is mentioned in UTC and you have time zones, one simple thing would be just to subscribe to the IETF calendar so that all the sessions are there in your link, and then you can pick and choose and delete the one that you and keep the one that interests you, or otherwise. You can also do that using the application, this application on iOS, where you can select selected applications, and those one will be the only one that will be synced to your calendar. So there are multiple ways to do this, but I would highly suggest subscribing to the IETF calendar. If this is the first IETF meeting, I would also suggest maybe looking at the previous IETF meetings to get a feel of how the discussion happens. So this is the YouTube page for IETF, that all working group session going back a couple of years can easily be found, and you can just search for IETF 106 PCE, and you will be able to see how the session, and then you can get a feel of how the working group session runs, especially if this is your first meeting. So use these tools. So I'm done with the tool portion of the talk. I know that I may be going a little too fast, but I am much over time, so I have to do this little fast. The next set is what are the different sessions that happens. The main important ones are the working group session, IETF research group session. These are the normal business as usual, the most common things that you will that happens. The things that for a new person I would like to highlight is the birds of feather session, as Michael was also presenting, which he's chairing. There are 3 bots in 108. So these are actually very useful because these are new conversations. In working group and research group, they have such a long history. The documents have been there for a long time. And if you are a new joinee and you want to participate in some new work, always the BOFs and new working group are much easier to participate in. So be aware of that. In agenda, they would have a small mark highlighted with BOFs. So look through them and these sessions. The other sessions that you need to be aware of is the IETF plenary. This is about administrative discussions about IETF, like for instance, things like, oh, what are we going to do with this COVID-19 and how are we going to have IETF meeting? What are the criteria? All those discussions happen here, and a lot more in this thing. So attend that, get a feel of the IETF culture by attending IETF plenary. The hackathon is happening 1 week before this time. So it will start from Monday. So you need to register for hackathon separately. The hackathon is going to run for the whole week. So if you have interest in coding, you are an implementer, join this hackathon sessions and find information there. They have their own mailing list, so you can start discussing and seeing what topics interest you. Hot RFC is a way to introduce some new work and where you are looking for more feedback and collaboration within the IETF. This will allow you to introduce your new work and new idea in a short little snippet. Find that information on this page. We are also having an IETF Applied Network Research Workshop, which is happening in parallel to IETF. Again, you need to register for this separately. If you are registered for IETF, this registration is free. So even with the waivers, you will be able to attend these sessions, but you need to make a separate registration. Find the information about ANRW on this link. The IEPG, it's on Wednesday, next Wednesday. This is about operational aspects, and mostly DNS and BGP are always the hot topic, especially from operational side rather than new protocol extensions, but operational issues that people are facing, operators are facing. So these are also very interesting conversations. Be aware of that. This is on July 22nd, much before the IETF week. During the IETF week, you will also have some side meetings. These are unofficial. This is the link to find information. Lots of good, interesting talks happens here. So be aware of it. Like sometimes it's not there on the main agenda, so people miss out. So I'm just highlighting that side meetings are also very important. There is a technology deep dive on Thursday. This is a new session that IETF has been doing for a couple of last IETF. We went into routers deep dive a couple of sessions ago. Now this time the focus is on DNS. So if this interests you, join this session. And Meet Echo, by usual Meet Echo, you will be able to join Hackathon Start, the IEPG, and even the technology deep dive. I'm done with the session side. Now the final few tips. And I would suggest other panelists also, if I missed something, they can add those tips via chat to our other participants so that they are well aware of it and it is well documented as well. So my first suggestion would be that this whole thing could be quite overwhelming. So look over the IETF 108 agenda and identify what is of your interest. If you are, sometimes you are an implementer of a particular protocol, or you are in security side, it automatically, okay, these are the groups that interest me. Some people have little broad interest. So even for those people who are like, oh, I'm a student, I'm interested in multiple activities, I can jump into anything. So for them, I would suggest definitely focus on dispatch working groups, BOF working groups, new working groups which have just formed, side meetings. This is where you will find more interesting conversations because this is at the starting of their work. Whereas if you go to a working group where people are talking about just an update to an old document which has been there for 6 years, sometimes it becomes like little dull and can be a little bit lost. So if you have broad interest, I would suggest follow this approach. And other people have different ideas, please write them in the chat. This is my personal hints that I thought would be good to follow. Ask for an IETF guide if you are a newbie and this is the first IETF, or there is a program in IETF, you can ask for a mentor and they can give you helpful hints, something like how I have collected, but these can be much more personal conversation. And you also have a friend at IETF who you have met. So use this opportunity just by click. And you can ask for an IETF mentor, mention these are your areas of interest, and IETF Edu team will try to match you with the right mentor. The next tip would be maintain your calendar, decide which groups you are going to participate, categorize them, only 1 or 2 where you are presenting or you are the key participant, you have a different level of preparation needed there. Some places you just you know the technology well, you are aware of the discussion, but you have nothing to present, but you might want to listen into. That's passive participation. And even sometimes the IETF uses the word tourist in the sense that you landed into a working group session, you know nothing about it, and you sit and see, oh, maybe I'll learn something, or even give an input, because this is how the cross area work happens. Otherwise, most of us have specialization in one area, and this is how being a tourist helps you. And just going out into a session that you know nothing about or little about and attending them can also be quite fun. So I would also suggest that pick a few, not too many, especially if you are new. Then prepare for the sessions based on the categories that you have. The agenda is posted in advance. So you can be aware of what's all going to be discussed. You will not be surprised to go through the agenda. The drafts are actually already posted. The deadline was this Monday, so you have enough time to read those drafts as well. Mostly the slides are also posted in advance, so you can go through the slides well in advance and keep your thoughts and questions ready, especially for the key sessions that you have. If you have not joined the mailing list, join the mailing list, look through the mailing list archive to find out what discussions have happened in the past so that you are well aware of little bit history. Look at the past meeting minutes, especially for the key minutes, so you have a good idea of what's the discussions that have happened in the past and you are not completely in the blindsided by something. What to do during the session. One thing, sitting at home, I would suggest like what I'm currently doing. I'm running this session on two laptops and one iPad. So it gives you to play around. You keep your slides and video on one screen, let your chat and Q&A happen on another. You can take notes, you can look at the draft, do a quick search, all of that in parallel, but make sure to avoid the urge to look at your emails and focus on the actual presentations that's happening. But multiple screens would definitely be useful at your home when you are participating. And if you are presenting, do the checks with your audio headset and video well in advance. It will be very disruptive to the meeting if during the meeting, you have issues that can easily be solved by joining a little early and talking to the chairs and making sure that your headsets and the system that you're going to actually use to connect and this, the same setup, you do a test before the actual working group session where you are participating, asking a question, etc. You can always write your question into the chat/Jabber if that makes you more comfortable rather than going into the queue. It's up to you, but I would suggest joining the queue. Now that we are all online, we are all the same participation. If you have a valid technical question, go and ask. The final slide that I have is about the meeting etiquette. Practice any good online meeting practice, test your configuration, always join the queue. Don't press the speak now button. In Meet Echo, they have a send audio button that will let you speak without joining the queue. Don't use that. Always join the queue and let the chairs give you permission to speak. Use a good headset and test it. Make sure it's working properly and make sure that the online meeting, and I know these days we all have had good practice in that, which was not the case so much when only a few people were remote in IETF, but now we all are doing remote meetings. Technical comments and questions are welcome. If you have a question that's taking too much time, be aware of the agenda time and always take longer conversations in chat or in the mailing list to keep those conversations running rather than there is a very strict time limit that people have. People have like maybe 10 minutes to talk about their draft and answer Q&A. Sometimes they cannot go in detail, so be aware of that. Don't be disheartened if your question did not get answered fully. Use the chat/Jabber mailing list and get the answers that you really needed. And be mindful of an IETF culture. IETF has a unique culture, and when you enter a new culture, you have to be mindful of it. So just do that. Vinayak was talking about this a little earlier. We are thinking of doing like a happy hour. Let's see how that works out, whether we use gather.town or we set up one of these Zoom calls itself. Let's see where this thing, but IETF, you should socialize, find your tribe. There is an IETF sister list, especially from the women participation. There is people who like to run, cycle during the IETF meet. There is the IETF Community India. Like this, there are a lot more other things, non-technical, that happens in IETF. So find your tribe within the IETF community. That's also very important apart from the technical stuff that happens. And one slide made especially because I know that when I was preparing that I'm bombarding people with a lot of information and that can be overwhelming. So one slide to suggest, like, especially if you are a complete IETF newbie, don't worry, just do this few little things which I think are most important. Pick one or two key sessions that you want to go in depth on and prepare for those well in advance. Go through the agenda, go through the mailing list, all that stuff. Don't be afraid to join as a tourist in some other sessions, especially BOF, some new working group meetings, dispatch, side meetings, etc. And don't be afraid to ask for help. You can ask for help in hallway, Jabber room, Slack, even on IETF 8 attendees mailing list, even to us using the WhatsApp group that the IETF community has, etc. We all want to help. We want you to participate in IETF. We want you to convert you from a tourist to an actual IETF participant. So we are all here to help you. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And that's it from me. Sorry for taking a little long. How are we doing, folks? Okay, I'll stop sharing. Okay, so I went over about 10 minutes. Sorry about that. Hi, so the next we have the panel. And let me share the screen. And I will invite Nalini to start with the panel. Nalini, are you there?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Oh, thanks so much, Dhruv. And yes, I wanted to add on a bit to what Dhruv said about asking people for help and building your network and talking to people. One thing that I used to do and sometimes still do is I look at things that I prepare questions in advance. If there's some questions that I have about things different people have written, I write them down and I say, okay, so if I run into Shwetha or if I run into Tiru, then I want to ask him about this, that, and the other thing. And it's people are very happy to talk about their work usually, and it's a good way to really learn about things and get to know people. But if you just want to do a little practice, in how to make friends. And what I'll say is that at IETF, these are some of the smartest people I've ever met and some of the nicest. So don't be afraid. So let's start up now, and we'll start off. And some of the senior people who've come for a long time, and some of the people from academia who are starting with IETF presentation, they're going to give you some guidance. So let me start off with Mr. Santosh. He's a senior scientist in the Ministry of Electronics and IT, and he is responsible for policy formulation and implementation about internet governance. And he has over 24 years of experience in policy planning and conceptualization of IT projects and implementation. He looks after a number of the projects related to internet technologies in India, and also IT for the masses, which benefits the disadvantaged people in India. And he is also on the Governmental Advisory Committee for ICANN. So Mr. Santosh, if you can speak, let me see, Dhruv, can you make him the speaker, or can he unmute?
Yeah, thank you, Nalini, for that introduction. And it's a pleasure and honor to be here at this RFCsWeLove session panel discussion on how to increase the participation in IETF from India. And I thank IESOC for organizing this virtual meeting over here. And seeing around 50 odd participants who are there. And thanks Richard and Fred to be coming online and giving us the insights regarding IETF. And Vinayak, who made the presentation about IESOC, it was good. Then coming to Dhruv, he explained everything in one shot. I mean, he may have taken 10 minutes, but it is more informative to the new entrants who are here in this virtual meeting. Now, yes, coming to the topic, how to increase the participation in IETF. If you ask me.
Sorry to interrupt you, Santosh. Guys, can you, if possible, can you just turn on the video when you're talking?
Yeah, there I am. So, shall I start?
Yes, Santosh, start off. Good to see you.
Thank you. So, to increase the participation in IETF from India, the first thing is, what I will say is awareness. I was seeing in the chat that one person was asking how academia should participate in IETF. So the thing is that we have more technical people in India, but they are not aware of internet standards, or we call open internet standards. So awareness is the first thing which we need to have more. Then, okay, it was a shock for me that IETF 108 being a virtual meeting, they're taking fees. Yes, peace is a very constraint for us Indians. Okay, Fred, thank you. So peace is one big constraint. And the third category which we need to work is concentrate. As Dhruv has said, we need to concentrate on the areas or on the working groups in which we need to work upon. So research has to be done. For academia, we need to have research so that we can write drafts for IETF. So I'm leaving this right now, and I will like to hear from other panelists as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much. This is Nalini. So we'll have a time for questions at the end. And so if you guys have questions, please go ahead and type them into the question box, and we will be able to talk. Let me now have Shwetha Bhandari go next. Shwetha is the principal engineer at Cisco, and she works in Cisco's securing routing areas. And she has been active since 2008 at the IETF, and she's currently involved with the in situ OAM work, which is at IPPM. And she is co-chair of 6LO Working Group, and she's also on the Ops and IoT Directorate. So Shwetha, if you might talk about your experience and share some of your wisdom, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Nalini. So quickly, I have been, since out of college, I have been part of the Cisco and started with protocol maintaining and building protocols. V6 transition was happening at that time, mid 2005-ish. So while being busy coding it up and understanding the system and all the things we do right out of college, some of the people in the team started this study group to go through the RFCs just the way we do in the RFCsWeLove and the meetups that Dhruv organizes and Vinayak organizes. So we started doing this study. We were discussing, reviewing the drafts that come out either in the areas that we work or which seemed very interesting or something new and quite different from what existed. So we used to pick that, and we used to have Friday afternoons dedicated to debate, discuss. And then given that IETF is open for participation for all, and we could always become participants via the mailing list, we started discussing, writing to the authors about the providing feedback, which is really important. I mean, as an author now, that's one of the key things which we look forward to, good feedback, which will help us improve the drafts. And more importantly, especially the academics, since some of the people from the academia are here, what has really worked well is students implementing some of the drafts that are yet to become RFCs and give us feedback to improve them and make them more implementable. So that's how it started. AAA protocols, DHCP, DNS were my areas. I used to work on those as part of my job. And it also helped to go participate in those discussions. Diameter was hot with 3GPP, and it started getting extended at IETF in late 2008, around that time. And that's where I started working, because I was implementing it, and we wanted a way, new diameter applications to do NAT control. That was the beginning of my contributions and more active participations than providing feedback and reviewing the drafts. So as part of it, you connect with so many people, you understand more than the areas you work in. So my work initially used to be in int area, but then you start understanding the routing area and security area and transport area just started becoming more interesting. And then I started attending IETF Live. Tiru was part of Cisco, and we used to have lots of discussions because we used to go to IETF together. We used to debate, discuss, and fight on what we should promote and what we should support when we used to work together on the same things. So that journey continues. You either as part of something that you picked up and you want to make sure it is consistent across work groups and areas. That's the in situ OAM work Nalini mentioned, which has been going on. I mean, IETF helps you build patience. So it needs to have that. I mean, you need to have that desire for making it perfect and having it very, the language should be consistent, and you need to make sure that there is consensus across people who come and participate. So that gets built as a author of the draft, or as a proponent of contributor, or proponent of frameworks and large protocol changes that we may want to bring about. What happened with V6 or in OAM case, where there are drastic changes that we make. Nalini has been helping a lot in the in situ OAM place. And that's how we start connecting, and also venturing out into different areas from what you typically would participate in. And the whole journey becomes interesting. One thing I would like to bring up, which academics and for even people, even others who are not doing active research but would find it interesting, is the IRTF work groups, right? I find the IRTF work groups super interesting. MapRG or PanRG or any of the research groups, the work they present and discuss is extremely interesting, and would also give you additional skill sets that you can pick up, which would help you evolve your career too, right? So that is another interesting area that keeps me motivated to continue going to IETF and meeting all the people there. Other than that, Vinayak brought up the ANRP research prizes that get that are selected every year for the good papers, and those people are sponsored. The selected papers, the authors are sponsored to come attend, fully sponsored to come attend the IETF during the year, and they get to present their work at the IETF open meeting, which is pretty good to make your work visible, as well as get connected with people who care about that work and continue that work. So that's another, and as part of that, as part of the ANRP selection committee, we debate and discuss all the papers before these get selected. And that committee comes out of the IETF participants too. So I've been part of it for last 2 to 3 years. And that is again a very interesting area for me as a more corporate person, but I'm sure academic people would also very much enjoy. So other than all this, one of the things that we notice which is missing from Indian participants is students, right? We see a lot of European students come participate in hackathons at the IETF, and they start really early, and they start establishing themselves as the experts in various areas very early on in their careers, which we see completely missing. If you see the fees and there are ISOC sponsorships and fellowships that Vinayak pointed to, and there is also fees-wise concession. And I'm sure you can find a way to make it to the IETF with university sponsorships or anything else. Maybe Mr. Santosh would be able to help here as well. So I think that's another key thing that we should tap into to encourage the students to start remote participation. Now everything is remote. Even the hackathons, students from all over the world participate, and that would be really good for our university students to start actively thinking about doing. Pick the areas, review drafts, and provide feedback, and write extensions when you think there is something missing. And seriously consider going to the IETF at least a few times during your student life, which is I think opens up to various opportunities and connects with the right sort of people. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. Nalini?
Okay, thank you so much, Shwetha. So let me have Tiru go next. Let me introduce Tiru. He is just lately, I know, working in ADD and DOH issues, very, very interesting areas, maybe very hot. He has many RFCs under his belt. I'm going to say, you can always search for people and say how many RFCs they have. Looks like 18 RFCs and many more in the pipeline. He's a very active contributor, works for McAfee. So thank you so much, Tiru.
Hey, thanks, Nalini, for the introduction. And yeah, I think Santosh and Shwetha have pretty much covered a lot of details on how to participate at IETF. I mean, I can say that I started my work at IETF in around 2012. That was at Paris. So from then I've been pretty much active at IETF. I used to work for Cisco, and yeah, it's been you always have a day job, right? I mean, you need to code, you need to design, and you need to take care of your projects. But at the same time, because of your projects involved, reading various specifications, understanding them, probably going through various open source codes, then you start drawing your interest to understanding how these protocols work, and then you start subscribing to these mailing lists to understand what discussions are happening, right? So I started that way, and I had great mentors at McAfee, I mean, who helped me write drafts and get them reviewed and introduced me to various folks at IETF. So that really helped me kickstart my contributions to IETF. And Fred was one of my initial mentors. Dan Wing was my mentor throughout Cisco. I still keep working with him. So I see, right, I mean, at least at IETF, right, I find it's a very open community. You can go and talk to any new person without any fear of whether that person would respond to you or not. I see people are very warm. People are willing to help you. So you don't have to be really afraid if you have to even walk up to a very senior person and ask them any silly question, right? I mean, there are no silly questions, right? So you can definitely go and approach people at IETF, send them mails and ask them what's happening, how do you contribute, start reviewing drafts, right? I think there's a lot more that can be done at IETF, and unfortunately, as you see, right, even the big companies in India, right, very few participation, right? I mean, Dhruv, Shwetha, and few others, right, have contributed a lot to IETF. I think there could be a lot more members from both the enterprise and academia which could contribute to IETF. And there's a lot of interesting areas at IETF, even for academia, right? The research groups that Shwetha was talking about, the privacy research group or the quantum cryptography research group, right? They're very interesting groups, but there's a lot of research happening, and that forms would help you to actually create your research papers, either related to ML or quantum cryptography or privacy, and then submit them and have a forum where you can discuss and debate those research areas. And not about that, right? You can also work on various interesting protocols. Either it could be at IoT, if you're developing something new for IoT, or solving any new security problems. For example, if you take MLS, it talks about a group-wide end-to-end communication channel, or the new TLS 1.3, which addresses various threats that the internet has been facing with its prior TLS version, right? So I think there's a lot of interest work happening at IETF, like virtualization. There's a group called NVO3. You can go and look into what virtualization work group is doing, what service function chaining is all about. Is all of interest if you're looking into virtualization and steering your traffic through network security services. I'm pretty sure the work that you do and the passion that you have, you will definitely find at least 2 to 3 working groups that definitely interest you. You should subscribe to those working groups, start reviewing the drafts, start posting the comments, try to understand where the working group is heading. BOFs is also a good start because that's a new area, and if that definitely interests you, do join that. I wouldn't recommend joining a working group that does not interest you or coincides with your work, because that may be an overkill, especially now that the workload maybe probably have increased for many of the people that they're working from home. So I would suggest start with the working groups that interest you and the working groups that have some overlap with the work that you're doing, and you definitely should contribute there. There's several members that can help you both from India, and you can get global mentors who can guide you on writing drafts. So there's no lack of mentors who can guide you on what to do. We're just phone call away, and we're all there to help you out in contributing to IETF and making your career successful.
Okay, thank you so much, Tiru. We'll have Shraddha go next. Shraddha is a principal engineer at Juniper with over 20 years experience, and her area of expertise is routing, MPLS, segment routing, and IP security. And she has written quite a few drafts. Some of the important ones are advertising and node administrative tags in OSPF and ISIS, graceful links, OSPF, graceful link shutdown, and a number of others. So thank you so much, Shraddha, and I'd love to hear from you now.
Thank you, Nalini, for the introduction. Quickly, right, the background, how I got into IETF work. So I've been active in IETF since 2014. So it all started with like, I was doing mostly the coding and implementation of RFCs, and I had a good idea about, how these RFCs work, and, how to convert these specifications into running code. So in one of the discussions, I was just mentioning that, this protocol had this kind of an extension, it would make things quite simple. And then one of the colleagues said, then why don't you write a draft for this extension? So that's how it all started. Going to IETF, my knowledge level has it's a completely different experience. Like I had all the knowledge of converting an RFC into running code, but I did not have much exposure into how this technology gets really deployed and how it gets used in the real network. So going to IETF gave me that exposure, and it increased my knowledge, exponentially. The way the technology works, the way the technology gets deployed. The futuristic thoughts on how the technology progresses, and all of those things. So I really, I mean, it's not only from career point of view, right? It's also your personal satisfaction of understanding how the technology that you develop gets deployed and gets used by customers. That's one of the great learnings that I have had from IETF. So some of the tips on how to get started with IETF, I think people have almost covered. So from my side, just pick up your area of interest. There's a lot of work going on, especially in 5G. Transport network area, and a lot of new technologies being discussed, such as segment routing, network slicing, and intra-domain technologies, SRv6, SRM6. There are a whole new set of technologies, especially targeted for 5G networks. So choose your area and go through the drafts in those areas and pick up things that interest you. Ask questions, subscribe to mailing lists in those areas, and just ask questions if you have any doubt, and that's how you get started. And in certain cases, even if you are not able to attend IETF in person, there will be meeting recordings that will be posted online. You could look at those videos on YouTube and see the presentations and try to understand the technology that you some of the drafts that you're interested, or some technology that you're interested, or some working group sessions. You can go and watch those on the YouTube, which is a great source of information. So another aspect is many a times we, especially for people who are working in corporate sector, we do we do think or we do know that, you know, there are some gaps, or, you know, this protocol had this extension, then that things would become easier for deployment or easier for implementation, or, you know, those sort of things. Then just don't stop with that thought. Just go ahead, take a pen and write a draft. It's that simple, you know, to get started. And of course, you will reach out to people who are participating in IETF, and you will find people, definitely find people who will be ready to help you get started. So that's, I think, pretty much covered what I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you so much, Shwetha. And we'll end this with Mohit Tahiliani. And please, if people have questions, please go ahead and ask. And if we're doing okay on time, Dhruv, then we'll go ahead and take a few questions at the end. Mohit, let me introduce him. He's on the Faculty of Computer Science and Engineering at NITK Surat, and he's predominantly involved in the implementation of RFCs and internet drafts. He's a member of the steering committee of the NS3 network simulator and co-maintainer of the traffic control layer and TCP models in NS3. And Mohit, if you might speak also to some of the barriers to participation from academia, and how you know, those of us in IISOC, IETF, or ISOC can help.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nalini. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm keeping my camera off for now because internet is a bit shaky. I tried switching on a few minutes back and it was not working well. So maybe I can try switching on later after I talk. So yeah, good evening, everyone. And I'm really delighted to be a part of this panel. And I want to particularly thank IIESOC for giving me this opportunity to share my views at this event. Unlike my other panel members who have been very actively participating and contributing to the development of standards at IETF, I have recently started participating in IIESOC as well as IETF events, and haven't contributed to the development of standards yet. We haven't written any internet drafts or RFCs yet. So all the suggestions that I received just now from the panel members was really helpful for me as well to think about getting started with it. But I really feel, you know, I'm immensely grateful to be sharing this panel with all of you. So as a faculty at NITK, like Nalini said, I'm predominantly involved in the implementation of the RFCs and internet drafts. Basically, I got this thing into my course that I teach here because I was finding it difficult to give my students challenging assignments. My purpose of giving the assignments which are challenging was that it should be a value addition to what the student learns otherwise. And giving the same common assignment to all the students and then evaluating 60 assignments that are submitted on the deadline on the last day, and then spending time to find out who really did it and who had taken from some other source, I thought it would be too much of time waste for me, as well as the point is not served that the students are not learning. So over the past few years, since I started this exercise about like 5 years ago, along with my students, I'm happy to say that we have successfully managed to implement 8 RFCs, 9 internet drafts, and we are currently working on the implementation of 4 internet drafts that are very actively being discussed in the TCP maintenance group and the transport area working group, because my research areas fall in the category of congestion control and active queue management algorithms. So these are the courses that I teach, and I try to link the RFCs and the internet drafts that are coming in these areas and teach them in my class. So a majority of these implementations that we have done in the past few years have made their way to the mainline of NS3 network simulator, and a lot of people are using those models, and we keep getting feedback and queries about it. And of late, we have also started contributing to the Linux kernel. So one of our implementation got merged in Linux 5.6 in March 2020. Our other implementations are being currently reviewed by the respective community. We have also started contributing a bit to DPDK because we are building some queue management models therein. And we hope that slowly we will be able to merge all of these things what our students have been building. So being a teacher, I have particularly noticed that our students are highly excited about contributing to projects that actually get used out there in the real world. So if I give them a theoretical assignment, they would tend to just escape from that assignment or maybe take help from friend. But if I give them a very challenging assignment, telling them that there is a good chance that your code will be accepted by the community because see, there is a new internet draft, people are discussing about this new technology. It would be so nice if you could produce the first ever implementation in NS3 or maybe the Linux kernel and then give it to them. Maybe you can add them, add some value to their RFC or the internet draft and maybe point out that, in implementation, you found these kind of difficulties. So this is something that I wanted to do with my students. And I'm happy that we have been able to do that. Fundamentally, what I have done now is that I have incorporated all these essential aspects, such as the implementation of RFCs and internet draft into the course assignments itself. So all these implementations are coming as a part of the course assignment, for which I give them 30% to 40% of the marks. And some students continue over one semester to another semester. So I permit them to continue because we know that in 4 months, 5 months, you might not be able to implement a full RFC. So when they come and take another course with me, I just allow them to continue that previous assignment from previous semester so that they can continue for another 4-5 months, because you sometimes do not get very quick feedback from the community on the code. They are also busy. They need time to review your code. Then you need time to fix those suggestions which have been given. And it's a to and fro process that takes time. So I have ensured that I allow the students a lot of flexibility in assignments and try to motivate them by giving marks and putting them in touch with the open source communities. So this allows my students basically to learn beyond the theory, what I teach in class, because they get to work with the production level code and they are familiarizing themselves with the industry standards as well. So this has been very useful for me because several of my students have gone to build a very successful career in the field of networking. They have been doing masters and PhD courses in networking. Some of them are working with the best companies that work on networking. And this all efforts at NITK are helping me because we have been now able to contribute more than about 30,000 lines of code to the main line of NS3 network simulator. And one of the features which got implemented in Linux 5.6, we recently saw that it was listed by Phoronix as one of the best features in Linux 5.6. Then we recently have developed a new emulation tool at NITK built from scratch to foster research in the direction of congestion control and queue management algorithms. So if someone is following the transport area working group, there's a lot of discussion going on L4S, SCE, TCP Prague, the new TCP standard for ultra low latency. So we thought that there's a lot of work that aligns with what work I do here. So we have built a tool called Network Stack Tester. And I'm glad that that work was selected. That paper has been selected in the Applied Networking Research Workshop, ENRW, which is going to happen on July 30th. So my students and myself will be presenting that work on July 30th at this particular workshop, which is co-located with IETF 108, which is hosted by ACM, IRTF, and the Internet Society. So yeah, that's all from my side. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Mohit. That's very, very exciting stuff that you're talking about. It makes me think that we should have a subgroup or an interest group within IIE stock that is for academia, and in particular, maybe even contributors, or people doing code. Because as you were talking, I'm just thinking, wow, there's things that I would like to have done, and maybe we can do a kind of a matchmaking of people who want RFCs implemented, and then some students. But thank you so much. So great to have all of you guys. So now let's, Dhruv, how are we doing as far as time?
Yeah, a little over, but I think we can continue this conversation for at least 10-15 more minutes.
Okay, great. So we'll stop at the top of the hour. So if people have any any questions for any of the panelists, or really for anyone who was speaking, please go ahead and put them into the Q&A, and then we can get them answered. So I have one question for Mr. Santosh. Do you have just to ask is we know ministry has helped a great deal in supporting, and I really appreciate how much help there has been in all our efforts. And so just to say, do you have any final thoughts on wrapping up with everything and maybe how you see the future? And then, as I say, if there's any other questions from anyone, please ask.
Thank you, Nalini, for that question. Now, what ministry has done for the past 2-3 years, we have conducted awareness across India. Through two implementing agency, we call them implementing agency. They went to different engineering colleges and had a single day workshop. So we, through the implementing agency, around 30 odd awareness was done across engineering college from north. Then we had given fellowships to 16 people who could attend face-to-face meeting, and I'm happy to see few faces in the attendees who have attended physical meeting at IETE. And yes, the fees is a very hindrance for us, I mean, Indians to attend this meeting. So we have written, I mean, we have discussed many times with the officials of IETF LLC to either reduce the fees. So this was one such discussion we used to have with IETF. And the last one to have the IETF meeting in India. So I hope that if we have an IETF meeting in India, students, the academia, I mean the faculty, as well as the enterprises in India, they would get to know, okay, we need to work on standards also, because we are into a service-oriented industry. So we don't cater into standards. But yes, for the past 4 years, there have been a transition, but we need more faces over here because of our IT strength. We need more people to work on standards. So yes, government will play a major role. I mean, due to this pandemic, the more emphasis is given to other items. But yes, as our Honorable Prime Minister has said, that we need to be Atmanirbhar. So we need to be very active in the standard space. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Santosh. I think Anand, let me recognize you. I think there were some comments from you. So if you might unmute.
Nalini, I've added Anand as a panelist. So I think, Anand, you can go ahead and speak and even share a video if you would like.
Yes. Thank you.
Anand, you are muted. Could you unmute yourself and speak?
Mute, okay, unmuted.
Oh,
and shall I start my video also? Yeah, I can start the video or, yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, of course, okay. So, so I'm from the Institute of Science, and then I've been working in the, in the area of networking for more than 3 decades. So even before, internet came, I was there, as a part of the, community. So, so I personally, right, I have the passion for internet and the standards and, participating there. I'm very much interested. So, after seeing the way the institutions of IISc kind work, right? So, I wish to mention that the focus of the research community that keeps changing as the newer technologies come, right? For instance, there once upon a time there was internet, there was voice over IP, there was a fad there. I mean, there was TCP, a lot of work happened, and our faculty were very much involved in developing algorithms for TCP and things like that, and congestion control algorithms, they studied and all that stuff. So, and then slowly the wireless domain came in. and the focus suddenly shifted from the layer 3 and above to layer 2 and below, right? So so in the midst of this, right? So and then as you all know, the newer things are 5G has come up now. So the entire thing is moved to the communications guys. They have moved to these the lower layers, layer 2 and below. And the other extreme case is that people are working on things like data analytics. So the data science they call it. So there are two segments of things we can see. One is the data analysis side. The other one is the layer 2 and below. That's where most of the so-called research seems to be happening there, right? So but the way we have carried out, so to involve academia, right, into the bandwagon, into this thing of participating in IETF is something like this, which has worked for us. Maybe I'll quickly share with you how we can marry these two. On one hand, you have the research community that focuses on algorithms primarily, right? Algorithm development, and then that's where their interest lies in. So, but they may not be particularly interested in pursuing the IETF angle to their ideas, because their work will be primarily driven by some theory, some kind of experimentation to validate their ideas, and then move on to the next problem, right? So they tend to take few things for granted. For instance, they are not particularly interested in implementation details like packet header, what it should contain, and things like that. They assume that okay, somebody else will do it, and then we move from that point. So they try to abstract away some of these details, which are extremely important from the perspective of taking the IP packets and actually transporting them. Okay, so now here is the thing which we did in one of the projects. It's all funded by my ministry, and of course Santosh is very much around. It was something interesting. I'm hoping that this find the academia into the IETF. So participation. So the way we have done is that we wanted to develop an algorithm, because of course IASC focuses on research, right? So a deadline based algorithm, right? I mean, you schedule packet forwarding that is deadline based things, right? So for some time critical kind of applications. So what we did was that we let the PhD students work on their problem. And then we have not even told that, though we are working on IETF participation, that is our agenda of the project. But when we interact with the academia, we only talk the research angle there. Then what happened was that at some point in time, their algorithm required that they're assuming that the packet will contain some kind of deadline information already there as a part of the packet, right? So then what we did was that we suddenly found there's an opportunity there to why not put the deadline information as a part of the packet. And then we started interacting. We were the part of 6-ish working group. Then that's when we started asking them that why can't we have deadline information going as a part of the as a part of the packet. Then Pascal Thubert, he suggested us that this suits more like why can't this be a part of the 6-low working group, right? So those 6-ish can use it, but it's more generically that suits there. So then we the moment we heard that, and then we started writing the draft, and then that's how we ensured that our idea gets on one hand the research side is going on and in its own way, and then we tried to link it with this IETF kind of a thing, and then finally we were able to write draft, and Dhruv also knows about the current status of that draft, and and hopefully it will become RFC soon. Okay, so now here is the important thing is tell me, yeah. Nalini, you want to say something?
No, I'm sorry. I wanted to kind of, we're running a little short on time. That was all. So I am sorry, so sorry to interrupt you. We're running a little short on time. So I wanted to give Dhruv time to wrap everything up. As I say, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Right. So, okay, fine. So basically, so I just want to sort of conclude by saying that we should let the academia do the research, and there should be something in between, which to who will take this research ideas and then map it to an equivalent IETF problem, and then take the problem, take it further. So so we require projects of sort, and then they'll ensure that these projects will sponsor this thing, and projects in the academic community, and then have one group which is focusing on the IETF part, and while when they just closely interact with their their research problems, and then that way I think we should be able to sort of really take it further. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Yes, thank you so much. Let me turn it over to Dhruv, and thank you, panelists all. This has just been very, very exciting and very interesting to hear all of you. And thank you all. And Dhruv, so let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for this. I think we have just 1 minute, so I would like Nalini to speak and give her opinion in that last 1 minute, because we got all the other panelists talking about what we could all do. So if she has suggestions for all the attendees, I would like Nalini to speak in the last 1 minute, and then we'll shut.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Dhruv. Now, this is very exciting. The one thing that I'm going to say is India has so many very, very talented engineers. And one of the things I know, I know some of you guys have heard me say this a lot, is the internet needs innovation. And, to really do innovation, you need what I call freedom to be a kook. That means be a little eccentric, follow your passion. And so that's what you'll see at the IETF, is you'll see people very, very passionate about protocols. And, I remember one meeting where they had somebody asked, who cares passionately about the algorithm being one way? And half the room raised their hands. And who cares very passionately that it go the other way? The other half the room raised their hands. And so to me, it's like, if you're that kind of person, which I'm going to say, I think if you're still here after all this time, you're probably that kind of person. The internet needs you. And so so I think there's so much that you can bring, and it will enrich your life immeasurably, as well as allowing you to contribute to something which is so much greater than all of us. And so please stay engaged, and we will be having the connections. We're starting planning for that. Talk on the WhatsApp group if you want to help arrange. We're already talking to some of the quantum people about speaking, and the one good thing about having remote is that we'll be able to do that. So please help us organize, help us plan. IISOC needs you, the internet needs you. Thanks so much, Dhruv.
Thank you, Nalini. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, speakers. Thanks, everyone, for staying back. Sorry we went a little bit over, but the conversations were great, and I didn't want to shut them down. And I will be sending the slides over, so all the links, etc., for the tips, you all should have it. So expect a mail, and join our mailing list, join WhatsApp group, and see you at IETF 108. Goodbye.